All right, good evening, everybody. Welcome to Grounded in the Light Geothermal for Connecticut Houses of Worship. My name is Terry Eichel, and I am the Executive Director for the Interreligious Eco-Justice Network, a faith-based environmental group in Connecticut. I would first like to open with IREJN's Land Acknowledgement Statement. We acknowledge that Connecticut, Algonquin for land on the Tidal River, is the traditional home of Mohegans, Pequots, and many other tribes. We are grateful for our Native people's care for their home and will strive to preserve it for the next 7 generations. IREJN works with religious communities in Connecticut on environmental issues, with a special focus on environmental issues that intersect with other areas of need or inequity. For example, we help religious communities implement energy efficiency and clean energy measures. We also help them plant vegetable gardens, pollinator gardens, and fruit trees. And finally, we help with advocacy efforts in support of strong environmental policy. We have some upcoming events. Excellent. Including our legislative prayer breakfast at the state capitol on Earth Day on Wednesday, April 22nd, and our annual Earthkeeper dinner on Wednesday, May 13th at the Pond House Cafe in West Hartford. We would love to have you at one or both of these events. Information is on our website. I also want to highlight our I Care About Climate and Creation postcard campaign, which is going on right now. We ask houses of worship to sign up to host a postcard session after service. We ask each person to send just 3 postcards, one to the governor, one to the state senator, and one to their state representative. Once your house of worship signs up, I will send the contact person enough postcards, postcard stamps, and talking points to help you get started. This evening, I am pleased to partner with GreenerU, a company that specializes in decarbonization through energy efficiency and clean energy measures. IREJN has presented webinars on energy efficiency and heat pumps and solar and battery storage. All of these can also be found on our website. So I'm very excited to round out this series on energy efficiency and clean energy with one on geothermal. And in fact, IREJN was just honored this morning at Connecticut Green Bank's annual environmental awards with a community engagement award for our work in this area. So I will say there are lots of great organizations and people and community groups doing this work even in this time. And so I hope that you are able to reach out, find those folks, and build a network of people making positive change. So this evening, we will hear from Rob Durning, GreenerU's CEO, who will go over some of the myths surrounding geothermal and sort of unpack exactly what it is. Then we'll get to hear about 2 successful geothermal projects at houses of worship. Mark Lency will tell us about the project of Wellesley Village Church in Massachusetts, and Steve Hall will tell us about the project at Round Hill Community Church in Connecticut. After the presentations, we will have a moderated Q&A, so please put your questions in the chat or the Q&A. And so now I will hand it over to Rob. Thank you so much, Rob.
Thanks so much, Terry. You get this screen pulled up. All right, did that switch over okay?
Perfect.
All right. Hi, everybody. As Terry said, I'm Rob Durning. I'm the CEO of GreenerU. Welcome to tonight's session on geothermal retrofits. Just to give you a little bit of a primer on who we are, GreenerU is a 17-year-old design-build firm based in Massachusetts. And over those 17 years, we've helped our customers plan for, engineer, and construct their energy efficiency and decarbonization goals for their existing buildings. The type of solutions that we're helping them develop and implement run the gamut from the low-hanging fruit, lighting and controls improvements, envelope improvements, all the way up through the stickier problems like converting an existing gas-fired or oil-fired burner to some sort of heat pump and sometimes geothermal. The 2 photos you see up on the screen here are 2 churches that we've helped go to geothermal here. The first you'll hear from a little bit later, Mark Lency, Wellesley Village Church. We started drilling that test well the day after Christmas, so we've got this nice holiday-themed photo here. And the second is a church outside of Philadelphia. We have just drilled their test well, and we should be entering into construction there this spring for expected completion for their heating season this fall. So, the challenge that we're seeing out there right now is an existing building challenge. I think by and large we have figured out uh, how to economically design net zero new construction buildings. But 2050 is the year most people use when we talk about our climate goals, and 80% of the buildings that are going to exist in 2050 are today. So this isn't something that we can build new construction our way out of the problem. We need to figure out a way to convert these buildings that already exist, most of which are still relying on some sort of fossil fuel heat, to convert their heating systems to something that could be powered by renewable energy. And right now is the perfect time to be thinking about that as systems reach end of life, because if you buy into another fossil fuel system, you're tying yourself into another 20 or 30 years of that fossil fuel system, which is going to be right up against that 2050 goal. So that's why owners are looking at this now, right? These owners that we're talking to, some of which you may be in this group, they're looking at some subset or maybe all five of these factors in considering why to convert to either, some sort of air source heat pump or geothermal heat pump, or replacing kind, whatever they've got there now. They've got a failing end of life boiler system. For the last two or three cycles dating back, 30, 40, 60 years, the modus operandi was my boiler's getting close to the end or it's already failed. I call up my mechanical contractor. He brings out the most recent version. Maybe it's a step up in efficiency. He plugs it in and we keep going. Now I've got a suite of technologies in front of me getting pitched by a variety of different vendors saying, you should go this way, you should go that way. The engineer's telling me this, my contractor's telling me that. I called up five different people. They gave me five different quotes. I don't know how to compare them. Right? They're facing that challenge. They're also concerned about the unpredictability of utility costs. They like the idea of electrifying, but they may have heard stories about it not working in cold weather, or being very inefficient in cold weather, and their electricity bills spiking in the winter. They may be dealing with comfort or resiliency challenges. They may say, I don't have cooling in my sanctuary, and if I'm going to be taking on this big project, I want to expand where I'm cooling. I might have other places that are drafty or stuffy. How do I fix that? They may be feeling regulatory pressures. Places like Boston and New York City already have regulations that are forcing buildings of a certain size to decarbonize their operational emissions over time. So they may be thinking ahead to that and some of the compliance penalties that they may pay if they don't decarbonize now. And then some of them just want to realize their own stewardship, environmental stewardship goals. They may have said, as a organization, as an institution, we set these goals, we need to realize them. And all five of those may be playing a role. So it makes for a very challenging conversation. And we could sit here all night and talk about how to do it. I'm not going to say that it's an easy problem to tackle, but what I'm hoping to do here tonight is just quickly run through five myths that we're hearing from clients as we're talking to them, that hopefully will give you a little bit more clarity if you're in this boat. So the five myths that we're seeing: geothermal is too expensive. The ground around here isn't warm enough. You need a lot of open land to do geothermal. You have to rip out your whole existing heating system. It's going to cause a lot of disruption. And that the incentives went away. That's what we're hearing from customers as we're talking to them. So to tackle those, geothermal is too expensive. Usually what this line is given to us after they've had a high level conversation with an engineer who said, the cost to go to geothermal is more than twice as expensive as an air source heat pump project. You don't want to even look at that. Okay. Well, you're talking about one number, which is usually a very high level number given at a feasibility stage or even earlier. Um, but, and that is true. You'll see here, this is a real world example where the gross project cost is more than twice as expensive as the air source plus natural gas backup. But what they don't look at are the utility incentives and the existing tax credits that still exist that were enabled through the IRA. And when you look at things like that, you can even get that net first cost down to something on par with or even less than the uh, the air source plus natural gas system. But some people turn away just after they hear that one number and never look back to consider the other option. The other thing we try to coach our customers on is to look at the total cost of ownership. Yes, investing in a system like geothermal is an investment. It is a serious system that is going to have long-term impacts. And if you're going to take an investment in that type of system, you should be looking at the total cost of ownership. Now, what does that mean? What are your total energy costs going to be over time? A geothermal system can be 2 to 3 times as efficient as an air source system. How long are these pieces of equipment going to last? A geothermal loop underground could last 50 to 100 years. These are well-designed systems, undisturbed. They're going to last. You're also moving maybe outdoor compressors for air source systems into a water source heat pump that's going to sit in a basement. A compressor and a fan outside is going to have a lot shorter life cycle than a moving piece of equipment down in a basement. What are your other O&M and major maintenance pieces? How many different air source heat pumps do you need to put on your roof or outside where you're going to be multiplying the number of pieces of equipment that you need to maintain over that lifetime? Like I said, consider the incentives and the tax credits that might buy down that first cost. What are your long-term compliance and penalty exposures? Now, right now, this is the first year where those compliance payments are due in Boston. They're going to ratchet up over time as we get closer to 2050. There's no perfect science to really calculate what those are going to be, but it's a risk that needs to be factored in, and we try to help customers do that. And so when you look at a total cost of ownership over 30, 25, 30, even 50 years, the longer you look out, the more geothermal is going to pay back. If you're having a annual expenditure out on maintenance and replacement and energy costs that is maybe half of what you might have with an air source heat pump, that's going to catch up in the long run. And what we try to do is present that in a transparent and probabilistic way with owners that say, nobody can predict the future perfectly over the next 25 to 30 years. But in 80% of cases, in 90% of cases, in 50% of cases, the geothermal system is going to outperform the air source system on a total cost of ownership over that time period. Myth number 2, the ground in New England isn't warm enough to do geothermal. Now, what people are usually thinking about when they say this is they're thinking about that magmatic zone out in Yellowstone where you've got those hot springs and you're close to that sort of geothermal energy that you think of when you think of the word geothermal. Geothermal is a bit of a misnomer. What we're talking about here is ground coupled water source heat pumps. And all we're really trying to do is find a stable medium to reject heat into in the summer and pull heat from in the summer or in the winter. It's very similar to what an air source heat pump is doing. An air source heat pump's just using the air as the medium to push and pull. And the reality is 31% of geothermal heat pumps installed in the US are installed in the Northeast because the ground is a very stable medium versus the air in New England that can have a 100-degree swing over the course of a year. We'll go from -5 in the winter to 95 in the summer. And manufacturers of these heat pump equipment have a really hard time designing really efficient systems across that range. So they pick a number right in the middle where they say this system's going to work really well at 40 degrees Fahrenheit, and it's going to lose efficiency the hotter it gets and the colder it gets. The benefit of using the ground as your medium to reject heat or try to pull heat from is that it's very stable year round. So generally speaking, you're talking about 45 to 55 degrees year round when you get below the frost line. So we're not going as far down to get towards that magmatic zone, but we're trying to use the ground as a very stable medium to heat that, and we can do that very well here in New England. Myth number three, I don't have enough land. This is the site you'll see here of the Wellesley Village Church that Mark will present on a little bit later. This is in downtown Wellesley, Massachusetts. On three sides, we have busy streets, and on the fourth side, we have a cemetery. We had a very tight site here. It took a lot of coordination during construction and a lot of thoughtful care during design, but we were able to design a system that got 20 wells on this site. And this is completely heating and cooling their entire building right now. So you don't need a lot of land. You need a thoughtful engineer who's going to listen, and then you need a good drilling partner who's going to be careful on that site and work with the church or your organization to figure that out. Myth number four, disruption. I have to rip out my entire heating system. This one is, it depends. The reality is many retrofits can reuse some existing infrastructure. Depending on how your engineer thinks about it, you might be able to reuse your hot water piping, your coils, your baseboard radiation, and some of your ducts. If you can do that, you can lower construction costs significantly and cause less disruption in your occupied spaces as you're doing this retrofit. But the reality is, it depends. How old of a system are you talking about? Are you talking about 60-year-old unit ventilators that bang on and off and are noisy and rattle all the time? Maybe we don't want to have those in there. What's the condition of those pieces of equipment? What are your heating and cooling needs? Let's have, talk to your partners about, what you need, what you're experiencing now, your challenges, what you're willing to live with or live without as you're designing this system. And then think about where heating could be shifted to. If you're reusing some of your existing ducts or coils and you're using a lower temperature heat coming from that heat pump, you're going to derate those pieces of equipment compared to what they were doing before. They're going to be able to do less because they've got a cooler medium running through them. So we need to find a way to make up that heat somewhere else. Can we shift that to another piece of equipment and upsize a coil somewhere else? It might not be as disruptive elsewhere. But the bottom line is, find a partner who listens. There are going to be people who come in and say, this is what you want to do, and they put blinders on, and that's what they know how to do. If that's what you're faced with, maybe have a call around and ask, see if there's other people who could give you a second or third opinion on what the reality is there. And then have honest conversations with that partner about what your heating and cooling needs are. Myth number five, the incentives have gone away. The reality is, in 2025, the bill that passed did have a lot of impacts on the IRA and the clean energy tax credits. Solar was impacted, and residential geothermal, those tax incentives did go away. But commercial tax incentives and the direct pay provision, which allows nonprofits who don't have a tax liability, those remain intact through 2032. So that's a 30% tax credit for geothermal systems installed between now and 2032. And if you design the system with domestic content in the equipment that you're using, you can get another 10%. So up to 40% of the total project costs related to the geothermal conversion can be covered through the tax credits. And that's before you start talking about utility incentives that may exist. All right. So that's a really quick run through from me on the myths that we're hearing from customers. Hopefully this helped clear up some confusions that you might have. The bottom line for us is start with the building, not the technology. Understand what your building needs. Understand the envelope. Understand where you can reduce and employ energy efficiency techniques to reduce the load. Establish shared goals with your partner on how your design build partner or your engineering partner on how you're going to design this, the heating and cooling needs that you need within your building. And then within your community, what are the goals of your community in this type of conversion that you're going to take on? Are you willing to invest in that type of geothermal system? Study realistic options and compare them fairly. Don't just look at that first gross cost and throw out options that might be feasible for you based on, bad data. And then make informed, transparent and honest and informed decisions with your stakeholders. And that wraps it up for me. And I believe I am passing it over to Mark.
think maybe we had Steve next.
Oh, Steve.
Sorry.
All right.
Oh, am I? Wait a minute.
Okay.
Either way.
I thought it was Mark. That's okay.
Okay.
Steve, are you ready to
We can do
go?
Mark. We can do Mark. Sorry.
Yeah, I gotta call myself up here, I guess. Yeah. Now, why
Just
don't you go ahead?
while
Mark,
Steve is doing that, I wanted to say the incentives are really impressive in Rob's presentation, both the federal and what he was showing with the mass saves with the utilities from Massachusetts. Just for everyone who might be from Connecticut, the commercial ground source heat pump incentive is up to $4,000 per ton for incentives. I don't know if that's on track with the mass save incentive, if that's similar, but I know it's pretty substantial here in Connecticut.
That's it was $4,500 a ton when the in 2024,
Okay.
and it has been reduced slightly, so it's probably right in line with Connecticut.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. And the Green Bank is actually, the Connecticut Green Bank is a great resource for folks in Connecticut looking to find financing for projects like this. So, all right. So, Steve, is Steve going now? Or is it Mark? Who do we have? All
It's
right,
supposed to be Steve, but if you're not ready, I can go.
Steve, you're muted. There you go.
how about that?
All right, perfect.
Okay, good. Well, what Robert just outlined was just fantastic because it pretty much mirrored what we did here for the Round Hill Community Church in Greenwich. And I'll just say that they came to me. I kind of have a local reputation for being Mr. Green, and they asked me if I could help them. And their primary objective was to decarbonize. That was their primary objective. And so I said, well, let's do a little bit better than decarbonizing. Let's take a look at various heat pump systems. And I went to uh, the Green Bank, and they have contractors that they have qualified. And I was assigned a particular contractor, and we started working away, looking at the building and coming up with a solution. But then I said, no, I really want another option as well. And so I really had to kind of maneuver with the Green Bay and with Eversource. They came up with a lovely firm that really helped us out a lot. And I ended up with two quotes. One was Air Source heat pump, and one was ground source. And oddly enough, the ground source heat pump came in less expensive than the air source. And of course, I was personally aware from my past history and work that it's a really more efficient and much better system. So I was really delighted that it actually came in at a lower cost. Now, in our case, the engineering was done within each firm to come up with their own particular solution. And we did take advantage of the incentives of the IRA, and we took advantage of the incentives from Eversource, which were, I think, about I forget what I think it was around six. Was it as much as $6,000 a ton? In any case, the incentives absorbed about 60% of our capital cost, which really made this great. There was another advantage we had in this particular case of this particular facility because they had already installed and had working a 54 kW solar system. And I noted that they were selling it back at the grand total of about 6 cents a kilowatt hour. And I said, I think I can use that solar a little more efficiently with the running the geothermal system. So that's what we've done. So it really worked out to be a great advantage to them. I don't know that we've really worked out any paybacks. I don't think that was a huge factor in their decision in any case, but I do think it is working very well. We had two options. One was a full geothermal system with no backup, and one was with backup. We chose the one with backup, and it was a good thing we did in this past winter because of the extreme cold that we had. But it did continue to operate very, very efficiently. Um, I think you have some pictures there for me,
Yes,
and
I
you
do.
can,
I will share it right now.
yeah, share the first one would be the one with the drilling, the trenching for the geothermal.
There we go.
There we go. So what we ended up with design-wise was we needed 12 wells at 500 feet each. There was a local firm here in, at least they operate, I think, throughout Connecticut called uh, Dandelion, and they were subcontracted to my contractor, geothermal contractor. And we put in 12 wells of 500 feet each. And this was done in 1 week, little over a week. We put in 12 wells. And you can show the next slide that shows it all complete. And this was over a very small area, as we just heard, that can be done. So that was a completed drilling operation there. And in our case, repeating again what Robert was talking about, the mechanical configurations were all done in the basement, pretty much with existing piping and work. Um, we did have 10 Mitsubishis for classrooms that we converted actually to accept a water system. And if you can show what is it, what, they were just finishing up the all the connections in the basement. And what else can I say about this? Everybody's very happy about it. We completed this project. It took a bit of time to get it all organized and bid out and so forth. So it was overall the project was about 12 months, but the actual construction was 2.5 months. So, it was very, very quick, very easy. I really love the contractor that we selected. He worked very well with us, and I'd be very tempted to use him again, on other projects. Let's see, what else can I say? Yep. Um, I really can't say much more. I mean, open to any other questions that might come up, but that was really um, that was our project.
That's great. I know Pastor Ed Horstman has always been a really big proponent of this, and Round Hill Community Church has been a big leader in Connecticut on all of these climate action, environmental initiatives. So thank you so much, Steve, for presenting on the project. Mark, are you ready to go?
Yes, I am.
Awesome. Great. Thank you so much.
Let me go to the sharing mode here. Well, I gotta get back to the beginning. All right. So I'm representing the Wellesley Village Church. I'm one of the two co-chairs of the project. One of us, me, was more on the technical side. The other, my partner is, um, had been a moderator of the church and she did most of the interfacing with helping guide all the work going on in parallel with the members of the congregation and the staff. So that's how we organized the project. And since this webinar is more churches, I thought I would share with you a couple of interesting things, how long it took us to get here and the real numbers. So we did not wake up one morning and say, wouldn't geothermal be nice? And we started drilling well in 6 months. It actually was a 10-year journey for us. It started in 2014 when we took a small part of a capital campaign, and along with our church's commitment to environmental stewardship, like similar to what you just heard from Round Hill, you got to have that commitment to environmental stewardship to go through the work that's involved in doing this. Um, we took steps between 2014 and 2021 to seal the building envelope. That's windows, partially did our lighting. We put up a solar array. We had to modify the existing HVAC ductwork, like we didn't have air conditioning extended to all of the spaces. We did that kind of all those pre-steps, and we did that within that $400,000 budget. Then about 2022, we were at the point of, okay, our HVAC system is at the end of its useful life, which we knew was coming. The committee, and greening committee, was in favor of geothermal, and we did with, as Rob described, with oil, natural gas, air source heat pumps. People will come in and just give you oh, yeah, I know, 55,000 square foot building, it's going to be X. That we really did get people seriously bidding like that. I mean, very serious contractors without even maybe one walkthrough for an hour. With geothermal, you can't do that. It's got to be really engineered. As Rob said, you're going to go into an existing building. How's it heated now? We were bin tube radiators, and which was providing more than half of our heating to our rooms, and then forced hot air and partial air conditioning doing the rest. Well, that all changes with geothermal, how much that can reuse and so forth. So to get an even reasonably accurate number, we invested an initial $70,000 in 2022 to come up with the HVAC design that could be compared to oil, natural gas, and air source heat pumps. That got us to 22-23, which is what are our options? And it was exactly the scenario. I mean, I could use the words right out of Rob's mouth there. It came in fact, the numbers he showed you, that 4.6 versus 2.6, oh, it's twice as much. Those are our numbers, actually our real numbers. And so you tend to say, oh, that'll never work. And that's where you got to get into a couple of things happen. First of all, 2022, just as we were doing this, the Inflation Reduction Act came in and put these big federal incentives in. Game changer, right? So at the end of 2023, by the end of 2023, we had all these proposals. We had oil, natural gas as sort of drop in, and air source heat pumps. And we determined, and at this point, GreenerU was engaged fully in this with us. They did not do the initial $70,000 design. They were one of several contractors bidding. They're the only one that bid all the options. We had other contractors build, nobody else bid geothermal, but others bid air source heat pump, bid oil, bid natural gas. And we were looking at these bids and the margins that the contractors put into them. And the congregation, although geothermal is not new, was nervous about proceeding into a contract that had margins to make up for potential changes that might have to be made because the firms hadn't been able to do enough design engineering. So at that point, we made a very, very strategic decision, which turned out to be just a godsend, which is we decided to put another $120,000 with GreenerU to take the geothermal designs from about the 15% to about the 30% level, such that GreenerU would be comfortable bidding a fixed price contract. Without that, even with the numbers you're going to see, and even with the congregation's commitment to environmental stewardship, the fixed price contract was probably one of the three key elements that made our congregation decide to do it. And you need a bunch to get there. You need a firm like GreenerU that's really going to work with you to do it. And then you're going to need to put some money in up front because you're not going to get a good design that you can bid on and get the prices down where they can be fixed price without investing up front. So that's one big recommendation we would drop on people going forward. Hill background, we're larger than the round hill. We're 55,000 square feet. We were our HVAC was 30 years old with two oil-fired boilers that were more on the order of 40 to 45 years old. It looked kind of like the boiler room of the Titanic down there. With 7 rooftop units to push air down into 7 zones. I talked about it was high, radiator in that. And what we came up with, and this slide is gold because you're not going to find a lot of other places that actually compared these numbers. And you'll notice the top line numbers are the 2 that Rob showed you. These are the real numbers. This is the slide we actually went to the congregation with to get the vote. And you can see 4.6, almost 4.7 million for geothermal, 2.1 for heat pumps or natural gas, air source heat pumps. We built in contingency fees, which were a percentage of the total price. And you can see what the game changer is here. First of all, the mass save rebates, which we've already received this check. We got it at Christmas. It was a very Merry Christmas at our church, 675,000. And we are about to submit our tax return, first ever tax return, to file for these IRA rebates. And this $1.9 million that's it's 1 point, what is it? 1.9 million. That is just the 40% of this. We're actually filing for more than that because all of the project costs, our costs in shutting down the building, our costs in restoration, we had some unforeseen problems. We had a leak in the roof that had to be repaired that added to the project. So our claim is about a little over $2 million that we're going to get back against the project, which brings the nets down to almost a wash. And then what happened to us, the difference is about the amount of interest that we're going to have to pay with geothermal to have a bridging loan to get over the year to year and a half, because you had to build it before you can claim it, to cover that 1.8 million or almost 2 million now. Well, it turns out we overachieved on our capital campaign. Money came in faster than we thought. We did not need that $240,000. So in the end, they are the same. Now that fact, the geothermal, heat pump, air source heat pumps, and natural gas are all a wash. And here's real live, no kidding, we built it, numbers that says that is truth. So that's a really important point. Okay. And as Rob said, the longer you go out with geothermal, the bigger the difference in cost of ownership. Okay, these were the numbers we did. Again, these are the slides we went to the congregation with to get the vote. This is what we predicted. Same capital costs, but the further you go out, the more, where you're going to replace a geothermal, maybe the rooftop units or the heat pumps, not the wells. Every 35 years, you're going to be 25 with air source heat pumps or natural gas that are going to be in a much more rigor. As Rob said, you got like electrical components up on your roof, air conditioning compressors, all that stuff. And that's conservative. Replacement costs are less. And this is what we came out with utilities. And that turned out to be, we overestimated the cost of geothermal utility, the electricity that we were going to use. I can't say for sure what our annual cost has been, but based on the first 4.5 months through this very cold winter, we're running about just under 30% electricity than we had last year with oil-fired boilers. That surprised us. We thought we were going to be 30% over, we're 30% under the cost of oil-fired electricity, boilers and fans and everything you need to run. And so we went back and looked at it, and it's what Rob said about the efficiency. These heat pumps are running, since you only have to deal with a 10-degree band, they are really efficient. And that's living proof right there on that. So what we've got is we're not claiming net zero. It is net zero on site, and there would clearly have no emissions on site anymore. But we are using electricity off the grid that is not all green. If the grid goes green, then obviously this geothermal goes to zero here on that. The other thing we learned is, for those of you who can say air source heat pumps, our well field, and I'll get to it in a minute, is almost 6 miles of piping underground to do this heat sink, right? 18 850-foot wells. Well, on air source heat pumps, you're going to have to get that same amount of energy out of the air. So you know how big your air conditioner is on your house. Scale it up to a 55,000 square foot building. The answer is you're going to have 4 or 5 units that are between 12 and 18 feet high to do your air conditioning. And you've probably seen them in malls and stuff, when off in a fenced-in area somewhere on the ground or up on the roof. They're really big. Well, it turns out on our church, our roof couldn't support these units. They're too heavy, too big, and you have to have wind load and everything else up there. And we had no ground footprint to do it. So air source heat pumps was an interesting discussion, but it was academic because it was not a viable option for us due to the massive size of the components. And would you want those sitting next to your church on a small piece of property or up on your roof? Well, it turns out Wellesley would have never let us put it on the roof anyway, because it had been an eyesore. So air source heat pumps died because of that. And that's why on my slide, we really only showed natural gas and geothermal. And then for churches that have to raise money, the way we went about it, same way you guys would probably go about any capital campaign. The bulk of it went here to modernizing the HVAC system, but we put in our other goals. So, which I'll show the numbers. We needed to raise about $3 million for the HVAC. We raised $4 to handle these other things. We put up a solar array at another church. We actually own 2 church buildings, created an endowment for our youth ministry, their property reserve. And then our church is committed. If we raise money, we give a certain percent out to the community, and that's the projects. And that's what that is. So that's how we went about the capital campaign. And we were very blessed to have the congregation behind it, which gets to the decision the congregation made. We started in October with weekly meetings, talk about it every Sunday, go to homes, go to areas, invite congregation and talk. The council was meeting almost every week for 2.5 months to get us to the point where we thought on December 10th we could get a congregational vote. And as I said, we went in with the natural gas and geothermal being awash with the rebates. We took a big breath because December 10th, it was after the election, but before the inauguration. And we took a deep breath and said, we believe that those incentives are still going to be there. And if not, but the congregation said, if not, we'll suck it up and we're going to do this anyway. And on December 10th, we got an 85% vote for the geothermal option. And we put the first well down in December 2024. The rest went in April and May of 2025. And we needed to get that first well down to verify our assumptions with the hydrographic data, how deep was the bedrock, what we're really going to get out of the wells, and so forth. Okay. So a couple of thoughts on the decision process before I get into what geothermal is. It was a 10-year journey. Even when we said we really, really want geothermal, it took us 2 years and $150,000 to get to where we could take it to the congregation with a fixed price contract, which, by the way, that fixed price contract worked. We did not overshoot it, and GreenerU didn't overshoot it. We did use up our contingencies for things we didn't anticipate. In that time that you're making this decision, guess what? The cost goes up. The initial bids were even for the other ones, the air source heat pumps, the natural gas, where they said, oh, this is going to be 1.2 million. Well, they all ended up in the $3 million range too. And that was due to costs going up, more detailed work saying, oh, it's more complicated than we thought. So beware. Unfortunately, church is, not a commercial organization. You cannot, or we can't make decisions overnight, and we can't be directive in nature. You have to get everybody on board. And to that end, if we'd have been able to go single source, which is what the two co-leads wanted to do, once we got engaged with GreenerU and the initial design work, we said, why are we even talking to these other contractors? But you can't do that with a church. So we did have to get comparative bids from other companies. Okay. And it was not a unanimous decision. So now we're going to get into what we actually built and how it works. This is the outline of the building here, and this is our driveway around the building. So these 18 wells went in underneath our driveway. That's how we got and in a little courtyard here. That's how we got into the footprint we had. And it goes no problem. The asphalt does not stop one of these drill rigs at all. It's through that in a heartbeat. And then 9 of the wells come in one side of the building, 9 of the wells feed into the other side of the building. They combine, and down below in the basement here in the center is where all the magic happens. We have 18 wells, 850 feet deep. The first well we drilled, which is this one up here, confirmed how much energy we would be able to put into the ground or get out of the ground. So we knew 18 was a good number. It's a closed loop. The water goes down and back up and back through the pumps. We're not pumping groundwater out of the ground and putting groundwater back into the ground. It's a loop. You may not be aware that that type of well is solid. So once it's drilled and the pipe is put down and up, it's filled with mortar. It's solid concrete so that you get good heat transfer to it. We only had, and Rob showed you that diagram where you got overburden and bedrock. Obviously, in this kind of well, you want to get the bedrock as fast as you can because you don't get much heat transfer in the overburden. We knew what we had there because there had been other wells drilled for water, and the city tracks that in our region, or in our immediate area. We knew we'd be close. So we only had 25 feet of overburden, leaving 825 feet of each well in bedrock. That adds up, believe it or not, to over 6 miles of piping underground in this field. To give you an idea what it takes. So that's the well. Now I'm going to do a real quick basic because nobody talked about it here, and I want to make sure you understand how these things work on the heating, cooling, and mixed mode that we use. So in the heating mode, here's on this side over here are the 18 wells. So we have cool water, in our case, cool water coming up out of the ground, going to the heat pumps and being heated. And it goes to 1 or 2 loops. One loop goes to our baseboard radiators. So that's always hot water if you're in the heating mode. And the other loop goes up to the roof. And in the heating mode, that's obviously we're sending hot water up to the cooling coils, or the heating coils, which then send warm air down to our rooms. In the summer, this is a dual temperature loop. In the cooling mode, this will convert and the heat pumps will send or the wells go directly to the roof with cold water, and then cool air goes to the roof. So that's how the heating mode works. Cooling mode, this is another piece of efficiency we forgot about and why we're going to be even more efficient this summer. And that's that in the summer, you're going to take cold water out of the ground and the heat pumps don't run at all. They just pumping cold water up to the roof, cools the air, goes down to the rooms. That's it. You know, 2 pumps and a fan, 2 fans. So minimal electricity. So again, our electrical estimates where we thought we were going to use more electricity than we were using before were wrong. This is another reason we're using less. So our most economical mode of operating this is the cooling mode. Believe it or not, air conditioning is almost free. Free, not meaning, although if the technical term is free cooling, it's also economically almost free. The heat pumps can be kicked in if at the end of the summer we've heated up the ground out here and the water has heated up. We've yet to see that in the heating. And then there's this very interesting mixed mode. So our building is oriented with our walls north, exactly like a compass, north, east, south, and west. So in the spring, our north wall of the building is a big 2-story, all these offices and classrooms, is cold because it's on the north side. The south side is being heated by the sun at a low angle. Well, the heat goes back, and there's no point in pumping it back to the ground, cooling it down, coming back and heating it up again. We just send it directly over to the other side of the building. You're actually moving the heat from the south side and then heating the north side, and the reverse in the fall. Pretty cool. Okay, at this point, I was going to show you on a diagram how this looks with the building management system, but it turns out I changed my mind here, and what we're going to do is I'm going to take you live to our church. This is now a live screenshot of our, and not screenshot, it's the live sharing of the operation of our geothermal system. And what you can do here is, I said the system, remember, has air handlers up on the roof and heat pumps down in the basement. So you can get a quick overview up here, and you can see right now we're heating our water at about 92 degrees. We can heat it up to 110, but the building doesn't need it in right now. And I'll just tell you a little bit about operating this. And this is a simple version of our air handling unit. This is what it really looks like up on the roof. And I'm showing you this because I want to convey another thing we did not understand how important it was going to be, was getting a modern control system like this. This thing will do everything except serve you coffee in the morning. We have the outside air coming in, and it's being sucked in. This exhaust fan you see running here is sucking air out of the space, out of the room, so that you continuously have fresh air in there. This is a heat recovery wheel, and one of the energy efficiency devices that we have uses the moving air and recovers heat and energy. And then it goes through, right now it's heating. You can see that this is lit up red. It means we are pumping heat out to the rooms in the air mode. And this is going to our various, the VAVs. They're reheat units in the rooms. I can show you what the other one looks like. This one, instead of going to a bunch of, we have about 45 different rooms at the other area that area handler heats. And then we have the 4 big rooms, our sanctuary, 2 meeting rooms, and a chapel that are heated by this other. And here you can see we don't need to send a lot of heat to those rooms right now. And so these are only lit up 25%. And then I can drill down into all of this stuff and get information on all the settings, what everything's doing and all that. I can look at the floor plans of the building. So this is live what our first floor looks like. You can see we have this is this is a great story. I'll tell you why that one's red there. It's too hot for its setting. Why is it too hot? Um, one of the lessons we learned out of this is when you get a great control system like this, you actually find out what your HVAC system's doing. And we've spent about $50,000 to $60,000 repairing problems in the part of the HVAC system we didn't replace. Radiator valves that no longer operated, air dampers that are supposed to move that didn't move, thermostats that didn't function. And in this case, in this office, we had a reheat coil whose tubes were plugged. And so it wasn't heating up enough. So we went in there just 2 days ago, cleaned those tubes. But because of the balance we had set up when it was plugged, now it's too hot. So we're going to have to go in. Imagine a garden hose from your house. We have over 200 air diffusers out to our various rooms, each of which can be adjusted. So if you change one, imagine changing one garden hose trying to balance the flow on the other 199. That's what it's like. So it's taken us almost 3 months of tweaking, grooming, fixing stuff that's busted to get to where we are today, to where this thing's operating in a nice balanced mode. But it's a great tool because like these problems went undetected for 10 to 15 years because we didn't have the technology or wherewithal to understand if it's working right or not. This kind of system will do this for you. And then finally, of course, the heart of the system are heat pumps. I'll give you the advanced view. So there was also a question, do we heat the building just with geothermal? Yes, there is no backup. There are 3 cabinets with a total of two heat pumps in each for 6 big heat pumps. You saw the picture from Round Hill, like quadruple the size of their cabinets. Okay, they're about as high as I am, about 8 feet long and about 6 feet high and about 3 feet wide. 2 heat pumps in each. And right now, right up here, we're running at 13% capacity to heat it in this temperature we have today. And you can see here's from the ground, and the water is coming out of the ground at right about 49, 48 degrees, okay? And it goes into the heat pumps. It gets heated up, and it's coming out at, you can see down here, 91 degrees going out to our radiators. We have one of those pumps running. And we're going at full flow at about 92 degrees, yes, out to the air handling units, which then heat the rooms. And you can go back and graph and anything you want. So there's a ton of information that even, we civilians can use. And then you have your service team can monitor this remotely. I'm obviously doing this from my house. So the whole business with with monitoring and operating it is actually really significant. And we underestimated the value of switching to a modern building management system. So I have one more lesson learned slide to finish with. So I had screen captures there, but I showed you the real thing. So this is my last slide. And this slide I've added in these last 3 months as we've been grooming the system. You definitely need to incorporate allowances for unforeseen objects. When we pulled the old rooftop units off, we found major leaks in our roof, and we're faced with a large, forget what it is. It's on the $100,000, but so like we ended up paying $60,000, $70,000 worth of repairs. That was within our contingency, which, oh, by the way, if you uncover any repairs you want to do, like our driveway got tore up, our vegetation got tore up, any repairs you do, that goes into that 40%, that total project cost that you can get the 40% rebate on. So we did more painting in the restoration than we probably would have done because we can get a rebate. Everything we do, we're getting, 40% rebate on it if it is directly related to the project. Investing in design work, we already said that was essential for us. Then here's the thing I was just talking about grooming. I didn't understand we were going to do this much. But this was still pretty intense work. And I've got to compliment GreenerU here. And this is not a paid announcement for them. That have stuck with, we're still in weekly meetings reviewing down to the last rotor control valve and actuator and thermostat and tweaking the last rooms to get everybody the way they want it. And both my co-lead and I and the church staff all really firmly believe that that last bullet I have there. And this was here in this presentation before I ever got asked to present for GreenerU. So this is actually from the heart. Best single decision we made was to pick GreenerU, hands down. I'm a captain of a nuclear submarine, right? I can do big. I understand technology. I've done massive projects. I've never had a vendor partner ever work with me as well as GreenerU. So, okay. So subject to any questions. That's actually, remember that heat pump I talked about? This is the covers off of the cabinet, looking at one of the two units in one of our cabinets. There's not a lot to it. A big motor and a compressor and a heat exchanger with pipes coming in and out. That's it, folks. It's a refrigeration cycle. There's no magic here. This is our old boilers. Well drilling, you can see we're drilling right through what's there. That's the cemetery over there. Biggest mobile crane I've ever seen right there, lifting one of our two air handling units up over our 180-foot steeple over onto the roof. That was impressive. Neighborhood kids and me. This is a 10-year-old boy's dream watching that thing happen. So if you want to see any of this and you go to this website, every week during the construction, we shot a video showing you in excruciating detail what is well drilling like. Why do they have this cap here? What's this up here? Digging the holes, trenching, putting in the piping. So if you want to see what it takes to build it, there's a week-by-week video on that website right there that'll show you what it took to do this on our site. And that's it.
Awesome. That's amazing. Thank you so much, Mark. That's great. I've found that anyone who has done a big project like that is like so unbelievably enthusiastic about talking about it. So your enthusiasm is great. So Craig, I'm gonna, I know I can see we've got some questions in the chat and the Q&A. So I'm gonna, I'll let you take the lead on moderating the Q&A. So
Sure, I mean, we can definitely tag team it, but it looks like
for
the
sure.
first question in was from Eric Stam. Does geothermal work with a forced air system, and how does it heat 52-degree air coming up from the ground? Anyone excited to respond to that? I think we've got at least
tackle
three
that
people who
one.
can handle that one. Yeah, Rob.
Sure. So it's just to clarify, the medium being pumped through the ground is water. So we're transferring heat via water into the ground and back up through the ground. The ground itself is the bedrock. That's 52 degrees. And then we're using refrigeration cycles to either cool or heat that water up to or down to the temperature that we want it to be. So we use the compressors within those heat pumps to raise that, say, 52-degree water that's coming from the ground up to 110 or 120 degrees, and then we're transferring that to a coil up in an air handler, which would then be, the forced hot air would be blowing across that coil, across that 120-degree coil, and delivering, heating temperatures for your space. So yes, it does work with forced hot air systems, and it's using refrigeration cycles to turn 52-degree water into something that you can heat with.
Mark or Steve, anything to add there?
No, that says it. I'm sorry, I maybe should have been clear about that. The air, all those drawings I showed you, all of that was water, and I just kind of put a big blue arrow that said from the rooftop units, it's either hot or cold air, depending if you're heating or cooling.
And then, Terry, do you want to do the next one?
Sure. David from West Hartford was wondering, are there geothermal heat pumps that can produce 160 to 180 Fahrenheit degree water?
Yeah, so I can answer that one as well. Right now, technology, it's not generally capable of heating water up to 160 to 180 degrees, where, that would be a one-for-one direct replacement of a boiler. Um, it's certainly something that may come down the road eventually. But as of now, you're generally talking about lower grade heat, something closer to the temperatures that you would want in your space. It's going to use less energy to heat water up to, say, 110, 120 degrees, and then use bigger, deeper coils to deliver enough sensible heat into the space.
Yep. Anyone want to add to that? Great. Bettina asked how you financed it. I think the question may have been originally to Steve, but I think probably hearing from both churches how they finance the projects would be great.
I can
Mark, do you
start.
want to go first since you're? Yep.
Yeah, we our plan was to look at our various um, reserves and endowments and funds that the church had and see how much uh, we could take a loan from our own without tapping longer investments that should rightly stay longer term. And we came up with a number that said we were going to still have to borrow about 1.8 million on the commercial market out of the 4.6 that we had to come up with. That was our initial plan. So loan it to ourselves at market rates. And then when we got to our capacity of doing that, go to commercials. And that was the interest line I showed you in that slide. But because we had more money come in faster than we thought, we never had to go to the commercial markets. We stayed 100% loaning the money to ourselves. Of course, we're obviously extremely fortunate to be in a position to do that.
Steve, do you want to unmute yourself and sure? You're muted, Steve. So Steve, you're muted. We can't hear you.
There, can you hear me now?
There you go.
Yep.
Sorry. The church itself had its own resources to finance. We needed some additional financing. I pointed them to several options, and they worked it out with their own banking relationships.
So next question is, what impact do those ground source wells have on groundwater quality and drinking water, particularly if the site is supplied by well water?
I can't, well, I can theoretically tell you, and then I can tell you our actual. We had all 18 wells were dry wells, right, solid into bedrock, no water in them. So no impact on the groundwater because it wasn't there. But theoretically, you shouldn't have any impact on it because remember, these wells won't be filled with water. They're going to be, they're just a solid hole in the ground with hose in it that doesn't discharge or take water from the ground filled with concrete. So it's like drilling a hole in the ground and filling it back up with concrete has that effect. if you are in an area, we did go look at one place where they're in a low lying area with deep water table. They have an open loop system where they suck groundwater out at cold temperatures and then pump it back into the ground. They don't loop it back like we do. They might, but again, you're not doing anything with the water. It's just going up, going through a heat exchanger and going back down. So it isn't like any emissions or leaks, or there's nothing to leak. You're just pumping water out of the ground into the ground. If you had that, and with ours, you don't have any interface with groundwater whatsoever.
Great. Anything to add?
Yeah, no, just to I guess clarify that these are both or I think Round Hill was as well, but closed loop systems. So you are sending water down and back up within a closed loop, and completely separated.
Yes, that's what we did at Ground Hill as well.
Great. David wanted to know if the slides will be sent to everyone. Yes, this recording will be up on our website with PDFs of the presentation, so you'll be able to find that hopefully by tomorrow. It always depends on how fast YouTube processes my videos, but that's my goal. Craig, you want to do the next question?
Sure. So this is Friends of Silver Lake. I live at Seabury Retirement Community. We installed 36 900 feet wells in 2017, activated in 2018. They had projected about 9 to 10 years payback on the $1.5 million investment, and actually hit that at 7.5 years. Do either of you have payback projections?
We did not. We have total cost of ownership. So in other words, we invested 4.6 million, actually 3 with the rebates, right? We're not going to save in 50 years $3 million versus some other system. So I don't think you ever do. So we didn't really push it's not like solar panels, right? That you're easily going to pay for themselves. So we don't know that you'd ever get to complete payback. And rather we looked at total cost of ownership of the various options.
Mm-hmm.
Steve, do you know if there are payback projections?
Although if oil prices continue to go like they are today, that might not be the case.
We utilized Eversource. There was a organization that they hired out, and they did various calculations, but I'm not sure that we ever got to a payback calculation. Their prime motivation, as I mentioned before, was just to decarbonize, and that's all I think that we did so far.
Yeah, one of the great things that I find working with houses of worship is, of course, they will always look at the bottom line and how do you finance things, but there is always a significant piece of the decision making that just comes down to this is the right thing to do and we want to try and do it. So obviously they try to make it work financially, but they're also, as people of faith, willing to, you know, make sacrifices to make it happen. So that's a inspiring aspect of working with religious communities. Walter wanted to know how many families are in each of. Sorry?
I just want to have one other point about the payback is that, again, you're comparing to what though, right? So like you have to have a heating system. It's like with solar panels, to your point, like you could forego not having an energy generation system on site. And it's really easy to look at the payback for that. But if the counter positive is just having no heating for your church for the next 50 years, that's not really a fair comparison, right? You have to pay for a heating system. And so again, you look at the total cost of ownership, this is in some cases at least the least cost option. But sorry.
No, that's perfect. That's a great point. Exactly. Walter wanted to know how many families are in each of your parishes and how much money did you raise in each of your capital campaigns to support the projects?
350 giving units in Wellesley Church and 4.1 million over three years, of which half came in the first 6 months. That was the big surprise.
Steve, how about Round Hill?
I really can't comment on the internal financing of the church.
Oh, okay. All right. Um,
But for churches, if any of you, we are willing to talk about anything. Absolutely anything. We will open the kimono and tell you anything to help you move along, whether you go geothermal or not. So if you want to know how we went, the details of our fundraising, you want to detail technologies, vendor, you name it. It's an open book if you contact us separately, offline.
So Hale Smith had a next question here. Village Church apparently used existing hydronic and forced air systems. How much of the existing HVAC systems required modification, and how much had to be replaced with new?
None of the radiators needed replacement other than the broken valves. They're 25 to 30-year-old motor control valves that operate, I believe it's 45 to 47 zones. About 8 of them are just dead, frozen, didn't operate, stuff like that. 6 thermostats that didn't operate. So broken stuff, that's the stuff we discovered after the geothermal system started operating. We had the building management system. We did not change. Remember, we had that 10 years before. We did add some ducting before we voted, which we would have needed if we'd gone gas or anything using forced hot air, right? We would have needed this ducting. We did add that additional ducting to get air conditioning to all of our spaces. But our existing building isn't big enough, doesn't have enough room for us to like discard the radiators and only go with hot air because you couldn't afford it and there wasn't any room to increase the size of our ducting. So internal to think of the envelope of the building, we didn't change the basics of the radiator loops or the pipes going up to the roof. What changed was once it got to those locations, we went from 7 air handling units, smaller ones, to 2 big ones. So obviously there's some plumbing right at the end there to get that. So yes, you hardly would call it a change. And we did need to run a second loop up to the roof because now instead of just 1 loop of water, like you would have had for heating in our old system, you have 2 loops. So a dual loop, one that goes to the radiators and one that goes up to the roof. So there was 1 loop of piping that was added that wasn't originally there. So I would say in the scale of the project, that's a small amount that went towards changing stuff. It was changing existing components other than the boilers to heat pumps and all the pumps down in the pump room. So that area is all new stuff, right? So what we changed, very little actually in the grand scheme of things.
From the Round Hill Church, we actually had a a design build type contract, and the contractor was a licensed professional engineer. And bear in mind the building itself, I probably didn't mention it was a new building constructed, relatively new in the 1960s. I wasn't aware of any mechanical issues. We had no change orders for any mechanical issues at all. We did have a separate contract for the electrical conditions, which was outside his contract, which we paid for independently. And that's about it.
Yes, we didn't have to we had sufficient electrical service to our building that we didn't have to do that. So it was wiring to the new components.
We did have, if we were going to go to a complete backup system, we did have an estimate. We'd have to upgrade our whole service to the church. That was one reason we opted out not to do that. Just used it as a backup.
Great. Thank you. Diane wanted to know, after the system began to operate, what type of maintenance is required and who monitors the system daily, weekly, monthly to ensure proper operation?
Great question.
Yeah.
So, we talked to the heat pump guys and we're like, geez, we're trying to think about what service, what do we do on a daily basis? And the heat pump guy from Tennessee in his drawl puts his hat back and said, most people send a person down there once a week to look at what they're doing.
Yeah, right.
You don't physically have to go to them other than general prudential, well, once a week, you probably ought to go down in the heat pump room and just see if something's happening. There's alarms for everything. You'd know if the water was leaking, you know if the freon's leaking, there's all these alarms. So you really don't have to do much on a day-to-day basis. And so it's twice a year service for ours. One is a more extensive one a day where they come in, they change filters, belts and stuff like this. And then at the 6-month point, they just change filters. That's it. For routine maintenance, day-to-day, not day-to-day, but annual. So it's actually far less than our oil-fired boilers required. The day-to-day, what I just flipped you through on that screen, that has remote alarms. So, which is actually another big project we did to get them tailored, but they will notify us and the people that have our service contract if we have a major unit issue, not if like, hey, this pump's vibrating or something, but air handlers down, heat pumps down, and they'll notify us 24/7. And then depending on how you set up, who's going to look at that, how often, which is also a financial question, right? If you want to have a service, or do you have a church member who's going to get up every 2 hours and look at this on a weekend? That will determine, who's looking for it. And then the routine stuff, let's see, I can share the screen again and show you. So again, this is live. You see this? If there's a major trip, it looks like from what we've seen so far, I can hit this button at home and clear anything except if it's a software problem. It's like, whoops, this pump didn't pick up in time and the unit thought there wasn't enough pump pressure, it shut itself down. Well, I can reset that with this right here. If something broke, and we've only had one thing break, and that was the power supply to one of these variable frequency fans in the roof. Obviously, we can't replace that from home. You're going to get it. Have to have a tech, and when the fan's off and it won't restart with this, then the technician's got to go in there, up into the building and find out what's going on. And we did have that happen once.
On the Round Hill Church, we have a very capable facilities manager. He'd been managing all the mechanical side prior to us doing this project. And he occasionally would have or has had a little control issue. And the contractor has been very responsive at coming down and taking a look and helping him out as needed. But it's been virtually no maintenance.
I see there's a couple of
My heart just goes out to people that say control issue, because I've been living that for 3 months. And what it is, I'm going to elaborate a little bit on this so they set the proper expectations. You've got the manufacturers of the air handling units have circuit cards and controls for the air handling units. The heat pump guys have their things that make their heat pumps all work right.
Right.
Then another organization, your control system team, has to design how the thermostats, the CO2 monitors, the pressure sensors, the outside air temperature sensors interface with these digital controls made by the manufacturer. And with all those bits and bytes flying around, you can, like one of ours, we rotate our pumps. We have 2 pumps. We rotate them periodically. Good engineering practice. Well, we didn't know that when those pumps shift, there's a brief drop in pressure and it's enough to trip the heat pumps off. So you discover that, and then you got to go change control systems to say, hey, heat pump, go A, don't change in the middle of the night on Sunday. B, when you do it, tell the heat pump so the heat pump keeps running. That kind of stuff. So that's these kind of control system stuff. Or you have a old component that doesn't work, and you don't know why you're getting a weird signal. That it shakes out, but it's in retrospect compared to our old. You have to write Fortran green screen control system that was useless for us, that we always had to pay to have anybody even look at. This is light years. It's not even the same world now.
So there are a couple of questions in the chat I want to also get to before we close out here. One for GreenerU, our third-party owned geothermal heat pump. This is from Arthur Helmus. Geothermal heat pump systems available for nonprofit organizations that want to avoid capital expense. The answer is yes, and actually, historically, that was the only option. It's only more recently that nonprofits were able to own the systems themselves through this direct pay method because they didn't pay taxes, and so whichever entity owns the system is one that gets the tax credit. So a private third party can definitely own the system and get the tax credit and lease the equipment to you. And are there minimum size requirements? The answer is no. Terry, do you want to?
Well, I feel like the next question was it says, does the Green Bank have a lease feature for geothermal like it does for solar? And that's from Ron Capozzi, but I feel like that's actually very related to the question you just answered, which is essentially how can a nonprofit or a house of worship install a geothermal system without that upfront capital cost? And so my answer to Ron is the Green Bank isn't the one that offers any leasing at all. The lease programs are through the solar companies that install the solar, right? They're third party. The Green Bank has different financing options like their CPACE program, which is a commercial based program. But I don't think they wouldn't manage the lease program. However, it sounds like something like that is available, which was actually news to me. So I've learned actually a lot on this. Geothermal is not something I know a tremendous amount about, but I didn't even realize this was a possibility. Craig, would you mind expanding a little bit on the third party option for geothermal? I realize we only have a few minutes left, but could you just sort of give the nuts and bolts of how that works?
Yes. So, high level, again, you have a third party that puts up the capital to construct the system, to install the system. They then own that system and they charge you to use it. So you pay them, a monthly fee to use your heating system. And so that's how they make their money back. But again, it allows you to have that installed up front. They capture that tax credit in that first year after they pay their taxes. And then again, they monetize that over the next however many years. Now, obviously, they're going to charge interest on their purchase for you on the debt they're going into to construct that system. So you are going to be paying more per month than if you owned and operated it yourself. But it is a pathway to have that $0 down option if that's a direction you all want to go in.
Okay, yeah. So that's not exactly the way the power purchase agreements work for solar, but there's some similarity just in the fact that you don't have to have a huge amount of money up front. So that is something to consider. So I will definitely be sending out. So I'm going to send out all the information from all the speakers that you've heard from tonight. If you want to reach out to them, you certainly are going to be able to. I will have the recording up. Also, so Ron said he looked at the time for a third party, couldn't find one. You know what, Ron? Craig and I will follow up. Are you in Massachusetts or Connecticut? Oh, Ron is answering that. Connecticut. All right, Ron, I'm on it. I'll sort of look around and see what I can find out for you in terms of a third party, just for your knowledge going forward, even if you're not able to move forward at this time. But anyway, the recording will be online. The PDFs of the presentations will also be online. And any other closing thoughts, guys? I know we got 1 minute left. I want to thank all of our presenters for joining us tonight, and for Craig. Craig and I have been working on this now for a couple months to bring this to you, so it's been really great working with GreenerU, and it's really wonderful hearing about all the great work that is being done and around our region and around the country. Still, in light of changes at the federal level, there are still people doing really good work, so that's inspiring and encouraging. Thank you to everyone who joined us tonight. We got good representation from a lot of different houses of worship, which is always exciting, because it means that many different religious communities are looking into different clean energy modes. So you will be hearing from me very shortly with additional information. Anything else? Any other Q&A? Nope, just Walter wanted to know if you could do the build again, would you do anything differently? But we're at 8:30, so
our surprise, not surprise, what took more effort than we thought I might try something different in how I approach the congregation to do this. But as far as the construction phase, design, phasing of it, no, I think I would be more prepared for this grooming phase than I was. I didn't realize we were going to turn up so many of our existing 25-year-old things that didn't work. I'd allow, a good 50 to 60 grand to tackle that stuff, and I'd allow the time. And I had to do a lot of being chief apology officer to the congregation when got a $4 million geothermal system and one room is ice cold and it happens to be the pastor's office. True story, because the thermostat was busted. We didn't know it, So I did a lot of that. I would have been more prepared and more proactive and tighter vendor organization, coordination meetings if I was to do it again. And so that would be after the geothermal lights off, getting it to in a complex building like ours to get every room to where everybody wants it.
Steve, anything different?
Not for me. I would be much more aggressive in talking about the financing upfront. I know that Eversource has now hired this firm, Adobe Energy, to help us out in that regard.
Good. Well, great. All right, everyone. Again, thank you so much. I appreciate all your time, your expertise. For the folks that joined us, thank you so much for giving up your Tuesday evening to be with us to learn more about geothermal. All right. Have a great night.
Everybody.